Welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jayme Marilyn.
And I'm Marilyn Brown.
And today we are discussing being mindful of mindfulness practice. I often get varying articles, but I got one recently about a woman who went on a 5-day meditation retreat for the first time, and 2 months later committed suicide. And her family, I don't want to say blames, because they actually don't blame, but they um, just, I guess, warned that it was this retreat that kind of changed her.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. We talked about this before, but just that mindfulness is very much a tool, and how you use it is just, is the most important part to me, because with any tool you can use it for positive things, or it could have negative outcomes. Like this specific place where she went was a 5-day retreat, but it didn't have any teachers
It's
on.
It was 10, right? 10-day retreat.
Maybe it was. Let me look here.
Yeah, because
Because the
I
initial one might have been
I went
5.
over it again, but I think it was a 10-day retreat. Sorry,
It was a 10-day retreat. So
yeah, accurate.
she did 1 month earlier, and um, was having a bad experience, so she left after 5 days, and then
Yes.
did some a couple months later, and then did a 10-day retreat. Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
And
Yes.
she, I guess this place didn't have, it had I guess volunteer teachers, and how they ran it was they just showed videos of kind of talks from a main teacher who wasn't present, and then you just got guidance from these volunteers, and the only requirement was that they had done one retreat.
Yes.
And I know in my own, because I'm not a licensed therapist, or anything. And for me, when I'm leading mindfulness, I'm very, very conscious of making that clear, and making sure that there's a line in what really I'm comfortable dealing with. Because,
Hmm.
it's meditation, even if you've never done it before, but even if you have done it before, is a very intense experience.
Yes.
And
And that
it
level of meditation for that long period of time, it's all day. Um, that's extremely intense on
right.
just your kind of emotional state. Um,
And the hard thing about it is, I think, from a teaching perspective, is that the vast majority of people have never experienced anything similar to it in their entire lives. So
mhm,
people react to it very differently.
mhm,
And you really have to be prepared and capable of dealing with those situations, because, it clearly can get to a dangerous level
mhm,
if there is no kind of, I don't want to say leader, but supervision of someone who really
mm,
knows how to handle the psyche. Because at the end of the day, it's self-reflection. You're really dealing with um, the, the psychology of the individual.
right. Yeah. I think that you really touch on kind of the most, or one of the more important parts, is that it really is it when you're doing intense meditation, that is exactly what you're dealing with, is the psyche. It's kind of like you're going inward to look at it and to like examine it and get curious about your own psyche. And for all of us, because that's such a personal experience, what's actually going on, and that experience of it, it's so individual. And so, there can be a place that safely had, hundreds of people go through a meditation where there aren't where there isn't maybe more trained teachers who are more experienced and it's more volunteer run, and not have a change in their, an extreme change in their mental health that ends up being fatal. But that one time, or, I don't know if this has happened at this place before, but something like that, I could see how that could happen. And so it is important to have trained people. And it's also, I think, just speaks to that, again, what you said at the beginning, is that it's a tool. Mindfulness meditation is a tool. And so with anything, it's going to have a different impact on different people depending on how they use it and kind of what the experience is. And so it's really difficult to kind of know what's going to happen. It sounds like she already, she did that 5 day and struggled. And so, and it's difficult for me because I see that they followed up with her in between, and so she did end up returning. But then she also reached out after the 10 day, sent messages saying that she was struggling, and it based on what they based on their responses, it just didn't really it was just kind of like, you'll be okay, but there wasn't really that extra step of taking some responsibility for having participated and given this person this tool and kind of supervise somebody in something that maybe affected them in a way that you couldn't have predicted. And so I think that's the hard thing. I think as a teacher, there is that, it's the same thing as a therapist. I think there's a level of, teacher isn't the same as therapist, but I think when you're, making yourself available and giving someone a tool, I think it's important to also have enough experience or awareness to be able to help in maybe those rare cases where something like this does happen. Like, I don't want to, make it sound like I think that a retreat like this couldn't be effective. I think there's people that have had, very profound, right, amazing experiences and go back and want to go back, year after year, or, for this type of meditation. But I do think that people are so different. And so in those instances, I think that having trained teachers and some sort of a opportunity for follow-up or ability to kind of seek help if you need it is important.
Yeah. And I would like to also, I guess, give just some pointers on people who are either looking to start up a practice at any level, or deepen their practice. And the one thing I think is most important is staying mindful while you're looking for a practice and really self-reflecting, because there is such a broad range of different practices and intensities of the practice that you really have to reflect on what your needs are. And most places are very open to discussing those things with you.
Yeah.
So if you are having emotional problems or psychological problems or any kind of problems that you think you'll need extra care while practicing meditation, because that's what all that's exploring, you can reach out to these places and see what resources they have available to help that. Like, for this, anyone who has any kind of emotional trauma or psychological trauma, I would say you need to go somewhere where there's people who are qualified to help you with those issues. And going to a place that's a 10-day retreat with just videos and no one there to really monitor you isn't the type of thing. Whereas if you've been practicing for 40 years and it's not a problem and you know exactly how you're going to respond and what to expect from a 10-day retreat, that might be the best thing for you. Right. Because it gives you the independence and no one's kind of trying to control your experience in any way. So it's so dependent on the individual that you really have to do your homework, and there's a certain amount of self-reflection that has to go in before. And some people aren't even mindful enough at the beginning to do that self-reflection, and they may just want to try something and see if it works. And I think that if you're not sure of what your needs are, you can always ask to talk to someone first,
Yeah.
and you'll learn a lot of things, because if they're very attuned and kind of can figure out where you're at just by that conversation,
Mhm.
that they're going to be able to guide you and help you. Or if it's someone who just isn't clicking and isn't getting what you need, and you're not learning anything new, that's probably not the place for you.
Right.
So it's all
Yeah.
about self-reflection, and I think asking the questions that you have.
Yes. Yes. And I think finding a space where you feel comfortable and supported in asking those questions, because I think there is a very huge difference in even just how places are set up and in how accessible people are, and if you can even
Mm-hmm.
ask questions and kind of feel like you can get that support. So I think that, I would say if someone doesn't know what their needs are and they haven't been able to kind of figure that out based on um some self-reflection, I would say try something, but try something less intense. Maybe go not going for the most, for an extremely long, um, very highly intensive silent retreat for the first time if you're not really sure what your needs are. Trying an online meditation challenge and doing that daily and seeing if you're able, what kind of insights you gather from that. Because for me, my approach and my work, my journey, my mindfulness journey has been a gradual process. And I at times became very frustrated with myself and very impatient, and I realized, no, it's actually, this kind of 10-year journey of me. I mean, it's been longer now, but kind of moving towards this and finding things and trying things out a little bit here and there and gathering books and talking to people and those things, like that was what I needed. And so it's helped me to be able to realize that for me, it was more effective when I was ready to do a retreat, to do a 3-day retreat that I had, where I already was aware of the organization and I knew enough about the teachers and kind of their philosophy, and they had been on my radar for some time. And so, but I think we struggle with that, wanting to kind of just soak things up quickly, learn quickly. I think that when we want something and when we realize that we want to start practicing mindfulness and need it in our life, that we kind of wrestle with that ego's impatience of wanting to kind of just like soak it all up right away and get the results. And I think, as a therapist, with anything that we're changing, we're most effective when we do it in a gradual way where we feel safe and there's support. So yeah, that would be kind of my biggest recommendation. And I think what's helped me the most in my practice, and to be able to find places and a community that felt supportive.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with all of that completely. And as you're saying it, I can't think of a situation where I would suggest to someone to even start with a 2 or 3 day retreat. And I think that the problem I see with having like a going on a 3 day, a 5 day, a 10 day right off the bat is that it's possible to develop so many bad habits, because it's so intense
Hmm.
right away, and you have no way to
Yeah.
gauge what's happening. Where if you start off slow, going to uh, a meditation center where they're going to literally teach you one day and it's 20 minutes, and then you go back and it's an hour with a talk and a 20-minute meditation, and
Hmm.
then after a couple months you try a weekend retreat, and then after a few of those you go to a 5 day, and then after a few of those you go to a 7, and then 10. You're able to gauge the experience. Where, I mean, I was reading that article and I just felt it, it was it kind of, I felt a lot of different emotions,
Hmm.
because I could just see. I mean, someone just guided her wrong, and it was she should never have been encouraged to even go down that path. Because what happens is, if you're in a 10-day retreat, and this was a retreat that was vastly silent. I think it said they were allowed to say like a sentence to a teacher
Right.
once a day.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's just, in my opinion, it's dangerous because so if you're meditating 20 minutes a day and then kind of gradually go on, you kind of gauge what, I don't want to say what's right and wrong or how things feel. So, oh, I love that your cat's. That's awesome. Her
This
cat
is
is
this
crawling
is
up the
this
screen
is
behind
my
her.
this is my kitten intern, and she's on the screen. I was like, where I could feel her down by my feet, and I was like, oh gosh, where's she going? She's on the screen. Kittens, sorry.
That is
Ah,
awesome. Uh,
I love it.
anyway, yeah, you kind of can gauge how your emotional journey is happening, and you have time to evaluate it. Where if
Yes.
you're in a 3 day, a 5 day, a 10 day retreat right off the bat, you're dealing with all these emotions and all these thoughts that you were never aware of, and there's no time to just retreat from it, which is funny because you're on a retreat. But you're
Right.
just it's just so intense
Yeah.
that it's hard. I don't know how I would cope.
Right. Well,
Like there's no time to really cope because you're
no.
literally stuck in it for 10 days.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, if
Yeah.
it's depressing thoughts or whatever it is, 10 days of just being stuck in it
Or
without any
psychosis.
guidance. Yeah, it's just
Right. Delusional
it's
thoughts. I mean, it sounds like what she was dealing with was delusions, and there were
right.
actual paranoid delusional thoughts that she was having. And so imagine sitting there for 10 days isolated with that. When you were talking, it really made me think about solitary confinement
Right.
and what happens to people in solitary confinement, and why I feel that it's extremely inhumane, because it just we are not built to be stuck in that place where we're just alone with our thoughts and there's no space to breathe. I think that, being able to have a retreat from that is important and is healthy, and especially when you haven't been trained and don't know what it's like to be in that experience. And so it's really a shock. And then it's also, we're very socially um, conditioned to behave in certain settings. And so I can imagine that somebody who is having really, really difficult thoughts that maybe are to the point where they are, they're having delusions, there's, whatever it is that's distressing. I also know that being in a room with a lot of people in this setting where you're supposed to be silent and not move, and feeling kind of that pressure of conditioning to not want to be the person to get up or ask for help or say I need to leave or something like that, would actually kind of just add to that person, even if they feel like something is wrong, still not asking for help in that kind of setting. And so I think that it's so important to start elsewhere and build up to be able to. And also, just, I don't even know, with the meditation that I've done and the experiences with it, I don't know how you integrate or process any of that if you are not if you haven't if you're just overloaded for
Mm-hmm.
10 days with information and with thoughts and with feelings and sensations and all of these things, but don't have any time or tools to be able to even make anything of it, or kind of, integrate that. And it's just it it's I don't know. Yeah, I just can't imagine that it could be ideal for most people. I think there needs
Right.
to be you know, some
Yeah.
experience, and also a safety net of experienced teachers there to, to know what to look for and to be able to help.
Yeah.
Um,
And I do know, I mean, I'm specifically talking about retreats that of this intensity,
yes, yes, exactly.
even day by day, because I've known people. There are week long, 10 day, 2 week long retreats that are created for beginners, where it's
Yes.
not silent the whole time. You're not meditating 12 hours a day. It's you're meditating maybe 20 minutes. There's a talk. There's activities. There's yoga. There's all this thing. So it's a full emergence, but it's not. an extreme right off the
Yes.
bat.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's the
That,
extreme that gets dangerous. And
yeah, that
I
was a
haven't, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, that one was a highly intense retreat. It was an extremely intensive retreat, and so I think that's much different than something that's built for beginners and has these breaks and these opportunities to be able to discuss. I mean, the retreat that I went to, we had sitting, and then we would walk, and then we would have opportunities where we would discuss, and there was, time where you didn't do any of it and you could just sit in your room. I mean, it wasn't a highly intensive retreat, and I know that I wouldn't be ready to just be expected to sit for. I mean, I read on there, it said something like 10 hours of like per day, sitting meditation. That I think that was an important distinction. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I think because some people do want to start with a retreat, with no experience, and know that for themselves, going away and going somewhere where they're actually doing it and doing it in a different environment, getting out of their space, really is going to be effective and helpful in kind of them learning and valuing it. And so I think that it's, there the nice thing is there's something for everybody now.
Mm-hmm.
There really, really is. There's so much out there. So I think, again, going back to like figuring out and asking and starting somewhere that's not the most intensive is important.
Right. And I mean, I only know, I didn't look into that specific meditation retreat beyond what the article said. But
Mhm.
even I
I'm
can't,
familiar
I
because of the name, but
yeah, it just, that's so like, I wouldn't even do a retreat like that.
mhm.
Um, it's just because it seemed like it was just sitting meditation pretty much
Yeah,
day in and day out. And yeah, I think it's a special kind of person who can do that, because for me, uh, I need I need other things that help me bring it into different places in my body and in my experience. So, like when
yeah,
I do go to a Zen retreat,
yeah.
you're going to have walking meditation. You're going to have Dharma talks. You're going to have cleaning of the temple. There's going to be
Mindful eating.
meditation hikes at night. Like there's
Yeah,
way, and
yeah.
there might be even like a keto or some yoga
Hmm.
or
Like
something. And
or yeah,
for me, what I love about that is it teaches you how to actually bring it into um, daily life, because you're having the experience more than just sitting in silence.
hmm.
And it's really, I think if I was doing those kind of retreats, I probably wouldn't have stuck with mindfulness very long, because it wasn't the sitting. I love the sitting meditation, but that's not what hooked me. What hooked me was a lot of these other um, practices that I would do, that was kind of the middle ground for how to bring what I was experiencing sitting into my life.
Yeah,
And I think that's the important part of mindfulness, and it's a
yeah,
part that that's the first thing when I thought, when I read the article, that I said, well, that if it that part wasn't missing, she may have been able to. And I mean, there's a ton of what ifs, but I mean, it seemed like there was literally no way for her to separate herself, because she wasn't learning how to use the experience she was having in a positive way. And I mean, just thinking, I mean, if you just explain what mindfulness is, it's pretty, it's just being mindful of your thoughts
hmm,
and being at one with yourself. And I know a lot of people who, me just thinking, it's, I know people who I would say it would be dangerous for you to practice this without guidance,
oh yeah,
because I know how I had a friend who did one, and she is just the kind of person where she's always very concerned about what other people are thinking. And she creates kind of, she will meet someone and she'll create this persona around the person based on what she thinks that person is thinking about her. And I told her she wanted to do a 5-day meditation retreat as her first thing. And it was a beginner thing, but there were long periods of
Hmm.
silence in it. And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be the best for you, because you're not going to get to know these people first. You're going to be with them for extended periods of time without being able to talk to them,
Yeah.
to gauge how you interact, any of those things. And she had a really terrible time and came back very depressed because
Yeah.
she didn't know these people, but she created these personas that they all hated her and were
Yeah.
being judgmental for the entire time. And she spent 24 hours a day, 5 days, feeling like these people were being judgmental towards her. And it took her weeks to get over it. And then when I finally got her willing to try meditation again, I took her to the temple I go to. That's just an hour. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple times a week, but she just came once a week for an
Mm.
hour. There was 20 minutes of meditation. Everyone talked, another 20 minutes of meditation, and then there were kind of a social gathering with cookies and tea and this stuff. And she was able to do it because she was able to get past the point, because she was meeting the people and knew who they were and they became friends, that she was in a safe place where she didn't worry about what they were thinking.
Right.
And now she can go to meditation retreats with strangers because she knows that when people are there, they're not judging other people. They're worried about themselves. You're there for yourself. And you're dealing with, I mean, it's so intense. You're dealing with a lot of your own crap. You're very
Hmm.
rarely worried about what's going on with other people,
Right. Right.
unless you're jealous and you're thinking they're very still for a very long time. I wish I could do that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I think that like she also had the opportunity to have more of a mindfulness of her own thoughts. So if she does go to a new place and there, are people that maybe she has that like feeling of they're judging me, it's more likely that she's going to be able to be mindful and say, oh wait, this is where my thoughts go when I'm in this environment, and kind of be able to get past it rather than getting stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, that I think that story really highlights for me the difference between simply meditation and mindfulness retreats. And I think that there is a difference. And I think that a lot of times they're not really, I don't know that people necessarily realize that there's a difference, but I think when there's a retreat and it's kind of more based on mindfulness, there's more practices. I mean, the retreat that I went to, they were kind of like, if we didn't also have you do the mindful walking periods and the mindful eating periods and these different things, then we wouldn't really be teaching you mindfulness, because we would only be teaching you how to be mindful when you're sitting on the cushion in a
Right.
meditation. And so meditation is a type of mindfulness practice, but there's so many things that are also mindfulness practice that you shared, that I think are really, oftentimes, I mean, for me, I think if I only thought that mindfulness, and if I had only approached mindfulness from just sitting and just practicing that I wouldn't be where I am now, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I would have really struggled with it. But I struggled with the sitting parts and really was looking for, really enjoyed the other mindful movements and yoga and Tai Chi and things like that. And so I had to kind of get myself to do the cushion work, but realizing that all of it is important, and all of it is how you learn, how you really kind of learn how to integrate all of this into it.
Mm-hmm.
Mindful writing, like I think journaling is important. I like that there's like, oftentimes like a period to kind of sit and write or things like that. Like I don't know. I think that part of that being mindful of mindfulness practice is doing research and looking at what places offer. And so if you do want to do a retreat, seeing what a daily schedule looks like, and just kind of looking at that, seeing if you can get a sample, and being able to kind of just have a better idea of what to expect. And also being able to find out, again, like you said earlier, what is the accessibility of people and teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, for me, and like we're saying, it's individual for each person. I can't imagine ever doing a meditation retreat without access to, really, for me, one-on-one time with uh, an instructor in some way, whether you have to request it or if it's just part of the process. I mean, I practice Zen, and it's always part. That's part of the meditation, is that there's a section where the teacher will go in a separate room and everyone can line up
Hmm.
sitting, and one by one you go in and you can just you can use the time however you want. You can ask a question. You
Yeah.
can just state how you're feeling, because sometimes in those, for me, what I love is I rarely ask. I mean, I've been doing it so long that I normally don't have questions, but it's nice
Mhm.
to once a day, if I'm in an extended retreat, just go in and express in words how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because you're thinking about it and it's just a different experience. And even it's just like, I'm just not having, I don't feel connected today. And I think I need to just sit for a little extra time, or like I'm feeling restless. My
Hmm.
mind's wandering more, just getting it out
Yes.
to someone. And normally, I mean, in Zen, it's very esoteric. So normally they'll say, give you some kind of riddle at the end
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
means nothing, and then you you go back and you think about that, and you uh, the vast majority of the time what I was expressing is no longer relevant, because it was just in my mind for so long that as soon as I expressed it, it wasn't there anymore. If
Okay.
I like,
Yeah.
so much of that is, and you learn that through mindfulness, how much of it is just in your mind. If I'm just sitting for a long period of time and I'm just like, I'm uncomfortable, and then I'm able to go in and express I'm uncomfortable, I'll come out and all of a sudden I'm not uncomfortable anymore, because it was just that it was on my mind and my mind was making me uncomfortable. And once I let it go,
Uh-huh.
which
Yeah.
is the other purpose I think of mindfulness, is
Yes.
learning to let things go, because
Right.
we're so conditioned to hold on to things
Yes.
for
Yeah.
our own security and our own safety, and a lot of times it's counter intuitive to our self care and to what's best for not only ourselves but others, and the environment, and just everything that we're connected to.
Yeah, yeah. That benefit that you were describing of just, just being able to go and just share how you're feeling, just kind of get those thoughts out, express that. I think um, that really brought up to me, I think really what is the fundamental kind of power of therapy is just being able to kind of go in and share what you're feeling. I think like a lot of times like a trained therapist is not going to really give you the answers or like tell you what to do. They give you tools and things to, different ways to think about things, but oftentimes it's just that feeling of going somewhere and being able to express and know that there's no judgment, that it's okay, that you're accepted, just no matter, if you're uncomfortable that day or there's something going on in your head that feels scary or unsafe or whatever. But just I think that like acceptance of another human being, or just kind of that recognition of someone being able to like hold that space for you and allow you to do that, I think that's so powerful. And I think that um that's really a major benefit of going in and finding a place where you feel that connection and have a community where you can have that experience. Because I do think that that that's it, that even deepens the experience and kind of integration of mindfulness. I think for me, when I was, willing to kind of step out of trying to do it on my own and going and being able to experience it in a community setting and what that felt like. So yeah, I think that's really important. And because we don't need someone. I think that everyone is. I really truly believe that we are our own best teacher. And so I don't think that really anyone needs someone to have the answers, but there is a skill in knowing how to hold space for someone
Mm-hmm.
and understanding and being able to sit with someone else's discomfort and be able to kind of, you know, be there for that. And so yeah, I kind of went off there, but
Yeah.
just kind of parallels therapy to me. So
And especially at the beginning of diving into mindfulness, and when I say the beginning, I mean this can take years before you get out of it. It can feel, and some people never, I never really experienced this, but I know endless amounts of people who have. It can be a very isolated feeling,
mhm,
to just sit with yourself and be conscious of your thoughts, especially in a group where the group's silent and you're doing this very internalized practice. It can feel very isolating. And what I know is very comforting to a lot of people is having that opportunity to express how you're feeling and just having someone say, yeah, everyone feels that.
Mm-hmm.
Or yes, I had that same exact problem, because it is
Uh,
it's
yeah.
though the thing I've realized really quickly from Zen practice was that as much of an internal and individual experience I was having, it was also very much a communal experience. And we would we would normally sit for 40 minutes and then do walking meditation and then sit for another 30 minutes.
Okay.
And then depending on the day, there were different activities after, but there was normally always kind of a discussion period. And what I started to realize is people were discussing their blocks and what they had experienced, or what was going on, is that the energy in the room and what other people were experiencing, even though I had no idea what it was consciously, I
Mm-hmm.
was being affected by.
Mm-hmm.
Certain
Yeah.
people who would sit next to me, I would have a different experience with.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
kind of, the more you would do it, the more you would see those things. And sometimes it's interesting how to think of it, because there were certain people that I would try to, when I first started, I would try to avoid, because I would feel like if I sat next to them, my medicine was always like something was wrong with it. And what I
Yes.
quickly realized that for me is when they would express things, is the reason was because we actually were having the same issues,
Mm-hmm.
and we were like heightening each other's experience of what our problems were. So it
Yep.
was just, it's nice to have other people and that ability to kind of share what you're experiencing and hear what other people are experiencing, just so you don't feel so alone in it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That feeling of isolation is it can be really palpable when you're in that space. And so I think it's important to be able to kind of share. I remember, I think one of the most meaningful moments that I remember from the retreat that I went to back in January was when we were having one of our breakout discussion sessions, and someone shared with me that or just someone shared like that they struggle with wanting to kind of just know things all the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, is that a thing? And it was just kind of like this moment of like, aha. And it's funny because that whenever I'm struggling or getting frustrated with, if I'm having kind of my internal dialogue of getting frustrated because I don't think I know enough about something or whatever, I laugh now because we were able to have this moment where we laughed about it, and we were able to just kind of like, oh, that's so human of us, to feel like we need to just know everything and get frustrated that we don't. But it's something that, for years there would just be these periods where I would just get stuck, like getting, kind of paralyzed by this frustration. And now, from having that one moment with someone at a retreat, I'm like, it just, I'm able to let that go so much more effectively, and going back to that letting things go.
Mm-hmm.
That's that the power of letting go and of non-attachment, that I think really is kind of the one of the core teachings of mindfulness, is really trying to just realize that we don't, attachment is not, I don't know, not effective. Like, we need to be able to let go of things. And so that was just actually just describing this now, I hadn't really realized how much it's changed that for me, being able to let
Mm-hmm.
that go. So yeah, I definitely think discussion is really helpful, and the community is helpful. I mean, we are social creatures, so we need that support.
Yeah, I think it also for me really helped with uh, broadening my sense of empathy and my, I'm not sure I want to put my ability to subconsciously lead with empathy and not have to think about needing to be empathetic, just being empathetic.
Hmm.
Because the training I did when I first started was very, very intense. It was from the lineage of the samurai, and much of it was still kind of that warrior, very rigid, structured kind of feel
Yeah.
to it. And I remember quite a few people would come for the first time, and normally what they would do is they would have the group would be meditating outside, and there was a private room where a teacher would take new people just to show them how to how to do the sitting the way we did it, and then depending on how comfortable they were and the teacher felt they were, sometimes for the second half of the session they would come out and meditate with the group. Sometimes they wouldn't if they needed more kind of one-on-one time, and quite a few times they would always ask the new people after, like, oh, so can you share your experience? And there were so many times where people would just break down for various reasons. There were a bunch of times where the only way they could explain the experience was that they felt like they were dying. And I think that's because of the type of meditation I did was very physical. There was a very specific breathing. You're in lotus position for 40 minutes, and your entire body kind of falls asleep. It just does. And then
what if your body can't do lotus position? Can you just
right? Yeah, you can do Burmese. There's there's varying ways you can do it.
But then you just kind of lose connection to your whole body, basically. At some point.
Yeah, and people like panic because they momentarily forget how to move their limbs. And some people have memories are triggered, or just thoughts they've been really avoiding, and it's just in a very emotional experience. And I think the community really reacted to each one of those in such an empathetic way that it really just was shocking to me when I first started. And it wasn't necessarily that they were being it was the energy of it. It was just I don't even know how to explain it. It was just all of a sudden there'd be an energy shift, and you could tell that everyone was just trying to bring comfort to that person, and that everyone understood and everyone was there to support, and that no one was judging. And I think that's what was kind of shocking to me, was because you could feel the energy of the person kind of being scared to express themselves, because this is the first time they're in this environment. They don't know anyone. A lot of people are very hesitant, and then you see that completely drop as they let it out and they see how everyone reacted to it, and kind of the shared I like the word support, because that's really what I think is the core of a I don't want to say successful, but effective meditation group or community is the support. Because as soon as there is judgment in that community, you're doing the opposite of the mindfulness practice, and it just makes it brings an extra challenge amongst all the other challenges that are just inherent to mindfulness, that makes it even harder to grow.
Well, I'm trying to think of any kind of final thoughts on this, because I feel like we did give kind of a good idea of how to be mindful of your mindfulness practice. But I do kind of just want to go back to how we started, that it was so sad. I went, going back to the emotions of reading the article, I felt so sad, because I did feel like, she was let down, and she didn't have the support that she needed. And so, I think that's really I think that's important, is finding that support where you feel safe to be able to be vulnerable. Because that's kind of what you were sharing about your initial, where you first started practicing mindfulness and learning. It sounds like they created an environment where people felt safe to be able to be vulnerable, and really let that guard down that we're all walking around in the world with on most of the time, and to actually be vulnerable, and to really be able to feel that connection and actually get that support and grow from it. I think when we don't have that support, we're not really able to kind of grow and move forward. So I think that that's really, that support, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a community and or going to a beginner's retreat where you feel like you get different opportunities to do different things, or talking to a friend who meditates regularly. I mean, the awesome thing is that so many people are practicing mindfulness and becoming more aware of it, and there's so many more opportunities for just discussion and just kind of learning and being able to share. So I think wherever you feel like you're going to, whatever's going to fit you and feel safest for you to be able to be vulnerable and get some support around it, that would be my recommendation. So
Right, and I think the other important part that I think I haven't said is the stigma around mindfulness and meditation. Um, that I think it's shifting, and more people are starting to know what exactly it is. But
mhm.
it is very an intense emotional and psychological and physical uh, exploration. And I think there's a stigma that it's kind of this hippie, kind of just calm and sit there and it's peaceful
Mhm.
type
Mm.
thing. But it's very intense. And if there are people who are having expressing real issues, um, they're most likely very real and very serious. Because
Yes.
I can see someone going to a 5-day retreat and expressing that they're now depressed or like something happened to them, and people kind of not
Mm.
taking it seriously because the stigma around it, or not seeing it as uh, something that is can be in the wrong hands and done wrong, very emotionally, physically, psychologically trying
Yeah.
on a human being. So I think it's just important, as more people engage in mindfulness, that we take the experiences people are having as individuals seriously.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that was a really, really good point to make, that we didn't. So yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that. Because there's a lot of just judgment of people's experiences, and when people are expressing something, I think a lot of times it may not even be that they don't believe the person, that they just don't take it seriously because that's not what they've seen, or that's not their
Mm-hmm.
norm, or that hasn't been their own experience. And so often we just devalue what we haven't seen or experienced ourselves, which is not very mindful, but that's,
Right.
but I think that that's really important. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and if you are looking for a mindfulness practice, and don't have a community to uh, ask questions or share your thoughts, there's always our Facebook group, which is Mindfulness in Action Civil Discourse. And if you have an experience you're unsure of, you can ask us our thoughts on it there, or if you have questions about what we think about a certain practice or retreat or any of that stuff. The We really want to build that community to be a helpful and supportive place for everyone's practice, because
Yeah.
it's important, especially on, I think, social media, which, like, mindfulness is a tool, and I think it's drastically at this point a tool for being non-mindful,
Mhm.
but it is very possible to use it in a mindful way. And the more we try to transition it to that place, I think the better off our entire culture will
Yeah.
be at this point.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the amazing thing about social media and the internet is that we're able to connect so many people. So if we're connecting people with mindfulness and compassion and empathy and all of those, productive things, I think that it really can have an amazing impact. So, like anything, it can go both ways. So yeah, I definitely want to hear from people of just questions that you have, or things that kind of have come up that you want to share about your own experience as well. So
Awesome. Well, I guess that's, I'm not going to call it the homework, but I guess that if you have questions or just want to express how you're feeling, if you just started a meditation practice or if you've been doing it for 20 years, I think the last thing I'll say is we were talking about the importance of the dialogue, and the dialogue, depending on the kind of person you are, doesn't necessarily have to be with others all the time. I think it's just important to get it out. If that's journaling, if that's feeling comfortable on the Facebook group to say, you know what, every Monday or every day, whatever it is, I'm just gonna do a quick little post on our group or on my page about what my practice was like today. I think it's helpful for so many reasons. It gives you in the moment a way to express how you feel, but even later on, I know I did that for a time just to see how many days do I think that have negative thoughts about my meditation? How many days do I leave having positive thoughts? And I just did it to kind of be aware of that, because yeah, you self-reflect on a daily basis, but it's sometimes harder to put the data that you're gathering about yourself into a bigger perspective and compare it to different experiences that
Yeah,
you're having.
that's very, very true. I think that, I'm a huge fan and proponent of journaling. I think that it's so helpful. That's one of the things that I think is kind of the most important part of my own mindfulness practice, is like getting up in the morning and doing where I just sit and I kind of just write like a stream of consciousness, few pages in the morning, and it just being able to reflect, and then, like you said, have that data and be able to see your growth. Because it's like, I think when we're experiencing ourselves and we're always inside of ourselves, so a lot of times it's just hard to even see how far you've come, if you're not keeping track. So yeah, I like that. So yeah, let us know what you guys do, because we have different things that we do for our practice. So let us know what you guys find helpful or have tried and haven't found helpful. um yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, well, have a wonderful week, and we will see you all next week.
All right, see you guys.